I love my job. I absolutely love my job because I get to see, thank you. I get to see the impact on students. And I hope that's part of what you love about your job. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. One of the other things I love about my job is the colleagues with whom I get to work and that I get to meet tons more colleagues all the time. And one of the people that I met, I think it was 8 or 9 years ago. And with Harrison Kleiner, I was added to a committee. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. I sat down and he said, I'm sorry. I'm going to say a naughty word because it's his word. He says, I'm sorry. Who the hell is Heidi Kesler? And why was she added in front of me? He said that. We have since become great friends. Yes, it is. He's so greeting. Anyway, that was my introduction to Harrison, and I was terrified. And I've since learned that he is one of my favorite collaborators. I love being with him. Do you want to introduce yourself or you want me to? So he is the Associate Vice Provost over General Education and the first year experience. He is also an Associate Professor of Philosophy. And someday, this is a plan, Harrison, so you got to start teaching this class again. My mother and my daughter is a junior in high school, and our plan is that the three of us are going to take his C.S. Lewis course someday. So you got to teach that again.
Still do teach it.
Oh, good.
Lewis and Tolkien. It's offered every other fall. If you have any
Okay.
fairy tale.
Well, fall of 25. Expect the Beck women there, Beck Kesler women there. Anyway, he is a great friend, and we love talking about this topic. So why don't we go to the next? Just the space bar or that. Yep. So, like, who are we? We all work at Utah State. What does that mean? Did you guys know that Forbes, the national magazine, they ranked, after doing surveys of lots of different companies, they ranked Utah State University as the #1 employer in the state of Utah. And what they were looking at was employee satisfaction, sense of meaning of what the job is, benefit packages. We're #1. I think sometimes we forget that we work for this great institution. Does that mean it's all roses and puppies? No, although we do sometimes get to have puppies on campus. But it does mean that, gosh, we have a great place to work. We have a great employer. And I think it's important to remember that even when we're sometimes frustrated with our boss or with our tasks or whatever. Did you know that that's our workforce? 11,000 people. We are part of 11,000 people. Almost half of that are students, which to me is so amazing because it means that not only are we employing students so that they have help with finances so they can afford college, but they are choosing to work in labs and in programs and helping to serve meals and clean classrooms because they too see the value of working for a place that values education and that will work around their class schedules and such. Gosh, we have varied roles. Harrison often will talk about how we are a municipality, right? Like we have healthcare, we have housing, we have mental health, we have facilities. It's amazing kind of what is part of this institution. And so we do have lots of different roles. And for some of us, it might be fairly easy to say, I know exactly how my role connects to students. For others of us, it may be a few steps. And that's kind of what we want to talk about. Really quickly, if a few of you would just shout out, like, what is your role and maybe what campus you're on? I'm going to pick on Anthony to get the juices going. Anthony, what's your role? What campus?
My role is Provost support services, working directly with students in Logan campus.
Yeah, so Anthony's with our Student Support Services TRIO program. What else? IT in Tooele. Awesome. Okay, Tooele scheduling facilitator. Extension Salt Lake. Academic advisor here in Logan. I'm repeating because of this, not because I'm weird. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we go across the whole state and we have lots of different types of jobs. So, let's go to the next slide. Do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah. So, given this huge variety of jobs, some of which are really higher education specific, right? Like being an advisor, you wouldn't go do that at Schreiber Foods. But a lot of the different jobs that we have could be done at Schreiber Foods, right? Like if you're an accountant, well, you can be an accountant in lots of different places. If you work in facilities, well, you can work in facilities in lots of different kinds of places, right? So it's worth us thinking about like, why does it matter that I work here, right? At a land grant institution, as opposed to any of the other kinds of places where I could maybe do similar work. Well, so we didn't put our mission statement up because they kind of thinned it out a little bit, and it's not as, I hope they make it better again. But here's something from President Cantwell, right? Though being a land grant university will always mean education, research, and outreach, Utah State is translating this mission into a 21st century imperative so that we can empower all Utahns to lead successful lives of involvement, innovation, and impact, right? USU is a land grant institution. Land grant schools were founded in the 1860s through the Morrill Act. Their purpose was to bring higher education to what the language of the bill was, to the mechanical classes, right? But the idea was back then, rich WASPs sent their kids to a handful of elite institutions like the Harvards and things of that sort. And then no one else got access to very much education. And land grant schools like Utah State were founded with the express purpose of providing access to higher education to people who did not previously have access to higher education. It's why we have a statewide mission. It's why we have centers all over the state, right? Is we're trying to serve students. It's still central to our mission, right? Make an impact for the whole state, right? Not just those of means, not just those of privilege and power, but access to all kinds of people. And there's three basic, right, parts of the land grant mission. President Cantwell here calls them education, research, and outreach. We sometimes say, right, the teaching mission of the university, the research mission of the university, and then outreach. We sometimes call that the extension mission of the university, right? Most land grant schools, including us, have those three primary prongs of our mission. Our presentation today, we're really going to focus on the educational teaching mission of the university, right? The sort of student-facing, that part of the university. And what we hope you can do by the end of the presentation is connect your work to this broader mission and see how you can be a part of what is really a noble and high-minded mission.
How many of you have had yourself or your son or daughter or a neighbor say a big why about coming to USU? What are some of those whys that we hear? Maybe we even hear them we do hear them in the news.
In the form of complaints.
Right? Like, what are some of the complaints that we're hearing? Why is tuition so high? Have you heard that? Right? What are some of the other whys? Both.
Maybe both. Yeah, maybe both. Like, what are sort of common complaints, concerns that you hear?
That you hear.
Education generally, or Utah State in particular?
Yeah. Do you have one?
It's too expensive. English and business degrees don't mean anything anymore. I don't want to leave the basement of my mother's home.
Okay, so he said it's too expensive. Degrees, particularly business and English, he mentioned, don't mean anything anymore. And also, I don't want to leave my mother's basement. Yeah, why get a degree if I can just get a job? And you know what? That cycles with the economy, of course, right? When the economy is such that we need more people, then we lower the requirements to get certain jobs, and it's easy to get an entry-level job. But then recessions hit, and guess who are the first to go, right? The ones who don't have the degrees. But right now, we need a lot of employees, and so workers, and so people are saying, my kid can just start making money right away. Especially our first gen students get that a lot. Yeah,
I'll add a couple
for sure.
complaint questions.
Great.
why do I have to, I will know I want to be an accountant. Why do I have to take a general education class? Why do I have to take this terrible intro to philosophy class from Professor Kleiner? I was at a dinner last night for I'm a coach on the Cache Valley ski team. And one of the parents said, oh yeah, my kid's a senior in high school, but he doesn't know what he wants to do yet. So why would he go to college? He doesn't know what he wants to do. Right. So no, he's not going to go. He hasn't applied, and he's going to just kind of take some time to figure out what he wants to do. Right. So like these kinds of complaints, these questions, like, why does it cost so dang much? Or why is this, I mean, here's a common complaint. Socrates, right, was tried, convicted, and executed on the charges of corrupting the young and not believing in the gods. Right. Which is still a complaint about higher education. Right? Higher education is just a bunch of left-wing Marxists who are I hear this in my philosophy classes. I have students say, my uncle told me to not take your philosophy class because you're going to turn me into a Marxist and rob me of my testimony and my faith. Right? Because higher education is a left-wing bias, and we've all heard this is a real political hotspot these days, right? And so these complaints, I think all complaints, are a plea for meaning. When somebody's asking, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? They don't know, they don't see the value in the thing that they're being asked to do, so they complain about it, which is perfectly reasonable. I complain when I am made to do things and I don't understand why I have to do them or why there be any kind of value in doing them. But our hope, right, is that all of us as employees at USU, because students and our neighbors, they do not distinguish between like faculty and staff, or if you work in student affairs or if you work in facility, like just everyone works for the university, right? And they figure that everyone who works for the university knows everything about the university and can answer any questions about the whole university. They don't make these distinctions that we do about I'm in this division or that unit or this, but that and the other thing, right? And so I think we all have this responsibility to be able to respond to our family, friends, neighbors, students. When we hear these kinds of complaints, to be able to sort of say something meaningful. It's a complaint is a plea for meaning. Let's all be in a position to give the students some meaning when they make this plea, or our neighbors, whoever else it might be. Well, the big picture of the why of the mission, particularly the teaching mission, though this would overlap with the research and extension mission of higher education, is that we are really in the business of creating learners. The real educational purpose, the successful college experience for a student, is that they have become a learner and they have developed the habits of mind that learners have, and they take those out into the workforce, they take those out into their personal lives with their family, and they take those out into their lives as citizens of the state of Utah and the United States. And so we tend to sometimes think, lots of people tend to think, that rightly, the university is an economic engine. The reason it exists is to prepare people for jobs. And that's why the state gives us about a third of our budget comes from the state, which, by the way, is very generous. In Arizona, it's like 6%. And University of Colorado Boulder, I think only 2% of their budget comes from the state. Like a third of ours does. And of course, the state wants a return on that investment, right? And a lot of that is economic engine stuff, right? You're preparing people for jobs. But then we can have this really narrow view of that. Right? Well, preparing for jobs means I'm coming to college to get a collection of professional and technical skills that are going to prepare me to do this job. It's why our students, they think their major is their destiny, right? Like, I'm going to major in this, and then I'm going to get a job with the same name as a major, and then 40 years later, I'll retire and get a gold watch at the ceremony or whatever, right? Which isn't how it works for almost anyone anymore. Right? Most people change not just jobs, but like industries 2, 3, 4 times over the course of their career. And they get frustrated. And when you have that mindset of, I came here to become an accountant, so anything that is outside of accounting is a waste of my time and it costs way too much. So why am I taking this intro to philosophy class? They get frustrated, right? Then a complaint comes. Why am I having to do this?
Yeah, and I love to do this little visual with people who are concerned about this. And so for those of you out in Zoom land, I don't know if you can see, but I've written on the whiteboard, learners, right? That's what we say we want to do. But our community, even our state, are saying, no, we want earners. But we're going to teach you about how becoming a learner actually creates the best earners. And so if we help students focus on becoming learners, the paychecks will follow. And we're going to talk in this presentation a little bit about why that is. And so, yeah, you can talk about that.
Yeah, so this isn't just like a thing that we're saying. There's a big study that's done of Fortune 2000 companies. And these Fortune 2000 companies are asked, what is it that you want out of your college graduates that you're going to hire? One interesting thing is that 93% of the employers in this survey say they do not care what you've majored in. I mean, I'm 50. When was the last time someone asked me what I majored in when I was in college? Like, nobody asks that anymore after you are done with college, right? It's the first thing students ask each other while they're in college, but nobody ever asks that again, right? Now, if you want to be a mechanical engineer, you probably want to major in mechanical engineering. If you want to be a social worker, it's a pretty good idea to major in social work. In some cases, it matters, right? But 93% of employers don't care what students that they're going to hire have majored in. This is what they care about. These percentages are the percentage of employers in the survey who said that this is what was very important to them. These were things that were very important to them, right? And what they want mostly are a collection of really broad, portable intellectual skills. Can you communicate effectively orally and writing? Do you have excellent analytical and critical thinking skills? Do you have kind of a capacity for ethical leadership and ability to work in teams? Do you have some understanding of global issues? Can you solve really complicated problems, right? Do you have broad knowledge in the liberal arts and sciences? Do you understand problems from multiple perspectives, right? This is what the university is saying. This is what the employers are saying. This side of the table, the percentages are, it's a study of general education programs around the country. This side of the table is the percentage of general education programs around the country that have these things as learning outcomes within their gen ed program. Here at USU, we have basically all of these, okay? And look, it's like gen ed, the part of the university experience that our students complain the most about, they are 21st century job skills. No, those broad, sometimes we call them soft skills, though I hate that term, because they're hard to acquire, right? But those broad soft skills, of course, they need to be paired with some technical skills and some professional skills, right? You're going to have a major or even a tech ed degree. All of our tech ed degrees have some amount of general education. Even the tech education, I've been going through a process of kind of setting some policy at the state level around what the tech ed degrees will look like. When you ask the employers who are hiring diesel mechanics, who are hiring welders, they list a bunch of particular specific technical skills, of course, as you'd expect. But then they also list a bunch of soft skills. They want resilient workers. They want workers who can work in teams. They want workers who can solve complicated problems. It starts to bring in some of these things. Now, the challenge, I think, for our students is that if you want to be an accountant and you're in an accounting class, it's perfectly obvious how the thing that you're studying in the class is going to port over to after graduation and how you're going to use it. But when that accountant is an intro to philosophy, it takes some more imagination and connecting a lot more dots to see how writing a paper on Plato's dialogues, which they're never going to do in their job as an accountant, like, why am I doing this? Like, it's an understandable question. But what we can all do is really help students connect the dots, right? Like, what's happening here is not that you're going to use Plato's metaphysics in your job as an accountant, because you're not going to. But by learning Plato's metaphysics, you are developing some habits of mind. You're becoming a learner. And that you are going to use in the workforce, in your private life as a citizen.
I would add, so my daughter is a strings musician, and she got some feedback from a competition that she was in saying that she needed to just tighten up her intonation a little bit. And I said, how do you do that? And she said, scales. You know, she's not going to go to some concert and just run through scales, right? But having that foundation of running her scales and practicing her scales, even though that had an eye roll to it, is what gives her the foundation to be able to perform better in the next competition. And so that's the way general education can be. It is the foundation. I love to talk about the degree like a house, building a house. And so the foundation is general education. You need a solid foundation. You shouldn't just start going all in on putting windows in and walls up and interior if you haven't really taken the time to build that foundation. That's what general education is for our students. And then their major is that house that you see, right? That's the question everybody asks in college, what's your major? And so that's their house. And then we have depth courses. And that is what like puts the roof on, keeps the rain out, right? This is a way of thinking deeply about things outside of your major. The university has been so intentional about how we build our degree requirements. It's not just like, oh, well, Harrison doesn't have enough students in his philosophy class. Let's make that required. That's not what we do, right? It is very intentional. I like to mention this last one. Co-curriculars are so important because I tell students, if you just do these 3 things, you'll get a degree.
Just check all the boxes.
Yep. If you're just checking off the boxes, you're going to get that degree, but your degree is going to look like everybody else's when you are out in the job market. And so that's when you start to say, gosh, I want to develop more people skills. I'm going to join the herd and I'm going to get really involved in student involvement so that I have those skills to build. Or, gosh, I just want to learn more about the world. And so I'm going to go do some study abroad and get involved with global engagement. Or I love community. And so I'm going to do some community engaged learning, right? That's what makes it distinctive and says, you know, I'm going to have shutters. I'm not going to have shutters. I'm going to have more curb appeal. And that is what's going to set students apart because they're building intentionally themselves as a learner in really unique ways. And the university gives them those opportunities to build out their sense of learning in unique ways. I think we can go to the next one.
Yeah, I just want to here, though, I want to go to the person last night who said their senior in high school doesn't know what they want to do, so they're not going to go to college yet. Around about 70% of our students change their major, right? Only 30% of our students graduate with the major.
Directly related to like,
Yeah.
Two of us, right? I'm not.
A number of years ago, it was 12 years ago, my oldest daughter was just a kindergartner. For fun, I asked my kindergartner, tell me all of the jobs that you know that there are that you can do when you grow up. So she came up with a list, right? You can be a doctor, you can be a nurse, you can be a lawyer, you can be a business person, came up with a decent list. Then I went to my intro to philosophy course the next time, and I asked my students, give me a list of, a bunch of 18-year-olds, give me a list of all the jobs that there are. The lists were basically the same, right? Because they had no idea what there are the things that you can do, right? And so, the university is a big place. There's an amazing number of things that you can do. I can be a watershed scientist and spend my entire life like studying trout in Western rivers. That's awesome. My kindergartner would have never thought of that. Most 18-year-olds would have never thought of that, right? But that's like a really cool job, and you can get that job by getting a certain kind of education at Utah State. I would add one other thing too to the extracurricular point. The house also changes shape by just the structure of the degree that the student decides, right? A great additional, I'll make a plug for philosophy. Be a marketing major. A philosophy minor is a great addition to that distinguishes the shape of your house. Otherwise, it's the neighborhood like Heidi described, right? Where every third house is exactly the same, right? And how do you get distinguished? The degree isn't what gets you a job. Who you've become is what gets you a job. That you've become a learner, that you have these kinds of habits of mind, that you can do these kinds of things. And the more you kind of customize your house and are really intentional about the degree, the better off you're going to be. The other thing we should tell students too is you can't half it, right? If you half your way through gen ed, you've built a shoddy foundation on your house and it's not going to be very sound.
But I can't solve with this.
We do.
Could you repeat the question?
I haven't heard being sold to students that way.
So
Repeat the question and then.
yeah, so the question is, are we telling students this? And we are. 75% of our residential campus students take a class, and it's not required, but they choose to take a class called USU 1010 Connections, University Connections. This is exactly what we teach in that class.
And we're working on bringing connections to all the rest of the
We're working on getting it to Tooele and other places around campus. A little trickier to figure out how to make it relevant and accessible to some of our post-traditional students, some of our students who aren't residential. But yes, this is something that we tell. And Harrison and I make the rounds where we talk to departments and colleges about this, so that we really want to infuse, and that actually is such a perfect lead into this slide. We want to infuse our whole campus, including our staff, our faculty, and especially our students, with this language. And we have some common language. We have this book for each of you to take on your way out. Matt Sanders, who is a professor here at Utah State over in communication studies, wrote this book. It's about 50 pages, easy read. And it lays all of this out and talks about kind of why this is important for us to understand. But we then have developed this common language for everyone who's taken Connections, everyone who's come to one of these presentations, where we talk about intentionally building, that the university has intentionally built and designed the degree. Now you be intentional in how you do it. We talk about becoming a learner and how that is also earner is embedded in learner. We talk about building a learning community. You are empowered as a student to build your community of learners. That includes peers, professors, staff members, employers. Those are your family. That's your community of learners. Think about it in those terms. We talk a lot about habits of mind, which we split into two things. We just talk about behavioral, which are kind of the executive function, getting to a place on time, being prepared, organizing and calendaring all your assignments so that you get tasks done, right? But then it's also the intellectual. So it's all of these things, right? So we want to teach that, and we call all of those things habits of mind. We have courses called Habits of Mind courses that students can take to learn all of these things. We talk
because it's about who the student has become.
It's about becoming, and that just is the foundation, right? Becoming. We talk about academic belonging, not just belonging to a club, but academically belonging, so that you belong to study abroad, you belong to your major, all of those things. You feel that sense that you belong there, that it's the right place for you. And all of this really creates what is called the citizen scholar. And that is that what we're producing is citizens who know how to think, who know how to contribute. Yeah. Yes. Okay. And I will say this is a rare thing. We usually don't record our things, but
I want plausible deniability.
you can hit the next one, the next thing. Awesome. So, but use this language, because when you say these things and students have heard these things, you don't have to unpack it. You don't have to say, now come watch this recording. You can say it and know that they've got a framework for it. If we're all using the same language for the same things, right? We've got some great resources system-wide that I want to bring to your attention. My office is the Academic Belonging and Learning Excellence Office, and you will find us at usu.edu/able. And there we have an academic resource finder that was created with a real collaborative approach. We had people from statewide, we had people from various offices on campus help us identify what are the resources, academic resources that students need. That can be found there, but you can also find then from Academic Resource Finder, financial resources and wellness and involvement resources. And then advising is, of course, at usu.edu/advising. And so know what these resources are. Go hang out a little bit in all that spare time you have. I know that's not true, but see if you can find some time to look at those resources and become familiar with them, because we want all of us to be brokers. If I refer somebody to Harrison, it might sound like this. Hey, you really should go talk to Harrison Kleiner, associate professor over in philosophy. I think he'll help you with a lot of the questions you have. That's different than, oh my gosh, you've got all these questions about meaning and purpose. And do you know who I just think you will love talking to? Harrison Kleiner. He's a friend of mine. He's great. He loves visiting with students. Let's pull up and see where his office hours are when they are. Gosh, let's make sure that you connect. Harrison will do the same thing. You're like, oh, you know what? You need to be talking to Heidi Kesler. So that's a brokering experience. I might even, if I had time, be like, hey, let me introduce you to Harrison Kleiner. This is my friend, and my friend can be your friend, and he'll help you answer some questions. So we want you familiar enough that it's not just like, I think the financial aid office can answer that question, but instead it may be something along the lines of, gosh, Craig over in financial aid, he's amazing. You should go visit with him, and he'll point you to which of his staff can really help you. But gosh, that whole staff, they're amazing, right? I ran into this yesterday. Well, let me tell you a very quick story. Sometimes I take on this persona that I've labeled the helpful Heidi, because I'm a helper. That's why I do what I do. I love helping people. But sometimes I'm way in this red zone right here. So a few years ago, several years ago, I was at Aggie Ice Cream. There was a line, as there often is. And I overheard this young man in front of me say to his friend, oh no, I'm not taking classes. USU doesn't want me. I had just been hired as the director of retention. Seemed like it was my job to tell him we wanted him, right? So what does helpful Heidi do? We do. We want you. We love you. Come see me. Here's my office. Come, let's set up an appointment. Come see me. We did not want him. There was a restraining order against him coming into the very building that I worked in. And I stepped in it big time because I didn't take the time to figure out what was really going on. I just was helpful, Heidi. So we've got to be careful as we're brokering that we really understand what's my expertise and what's my role. I used to be the registrar. I have some expertise in banner and the registrar life. That is not, though, my role. And so I can't do Fran's job, right? That would be inappropriate for me to be like, oh, I know how to solve your problem. But instead, what do I say? I say, oh my gosh, the registrar's office, they are fabulous. They will get to the bottom of this, and they will do it in a really great way that you will get your answers, right? I'm supporting my friends in the registrar's office. I'm not doing their job for them, but I'm brokering students to them. No, there's just some things I've heard people say, like, oh, well, I had a professor once say that I invited the student to come spend the night at my house because like there's this crisis going on and it wasn't safe for her to go. And I was out of bounds, right? There's some things that are just clearly out of bounds for us. And that if that professor had known about the resources available to help that student in crisis, they wouldn't have felt like they had to invite her into their home. Right. And so I think it's really important that we rely on each other's expertise. We have to know each other and know what's available to be able to stay out of the red zone and successfully broker within the blues. Go to the next one.
Yeah, I would just add to that brokering thing. One thing I wish the university did a little better job of, I think we're chipping away at it. A presentation like this is an example. It would be because the students and our neighbors don't make any distinction between like just everybody works at the university. It would be great if all of us had like sufficient literacy about all of the resources and things that are available around campus so that when our neighbor says, well, we're really frustrated at Utah State because of such and such and such and such, you'd be able to sort of broker them to like, well, you know what? I know the office that can help you with that. You know, let me try to get you connected with this person over here. And what it allows us all to do is see our work, right? We're all sort of ambassadors of the university to our student workers, to students we might know, to our neighbors. We're all in a way ambassadors of the institution. And the institution has this really wonderful, noble mission. And we can be a part of that mission, right? By brokering students and connecting students and helping people solve problems by knowing about the resources that are available. Another way that I think we can embody the mission is by modeling the mission, you know, in our work, in our communities, right? Like we are all hopefully lifelong learners. I hope that in your work, you get opportunities to be a lifelong learner and continue to grow, right? Because learners have growth mindsets, right? Learners always want to expand their horizons. Learners are curious. They ask questions. They inquire, right? They wonder. Those are all like learner habits of mind. Learners ask hard questions, right? And are critical thinkers. Learners are really intentional about the things that they do. Learners are good at reframing questions and facts, right? Lots of times complaints about higher ed are hung on a collection of facts, but the facts are framed in a certain way, right? And one thing an educated person, a learner can do is kind of take the facts, but reposition them and frame them in a different way that gives them a different valence. Learners are resilient, right? Hopefully you all have I have a lot of chances to fail in my job, where I do things poorly and I wish I'd done them better. But then I have a chance to dust myself off and begin again and do it better the next time and like grow and learn and continue to improve. And, you know, get involved, right? At the university community, it's really easy for us because we're all so busy to like go to work in our little corner of the institution and chop wood and get the work done, right? And the rest of it. And then there's this whole world at USU that's happening around us that's easy to not know a lot about. You know, as much as we can, branch out, meet other people from other units. Conferences like this, I hope, are a great opportunity. Like at lunch, don't sit with all the other people from your unit. Like purposely sit with people from different units and get to know them and find out what they do, right? So that we can like start to understand all of these kinds of things that are happening at the institution and get more engaged.
Just an acknowledgement and a little bit of a word of caution. You know, we are all busy, and I hope that you don't feel like what we are saying is that you should be spending 6 hours of your 8-hour day learning about the rest of campus. You can't do that, of course. But I do think starting off with knowing, how many of you are old enough that you remember the ad campaign? There's an app for that. Do you remember that? There's an app for that. That comes to mind all the time. There's a resource for that. So starting off with that mindset, and instead of, I think sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes work is just a grind. Sometimes it just feels like work, right? Even though we work for the best employer in the state, and even though that we have this noble mission of building learners, creating learners, giving learners opportunities, sometimes it's grind. Sometimes the problems are coming faster than the solutions. Sometimes we're tired, all of that, right? And so acknowledge that. What I don't want us doing is acknowledging that to our neighbor or to our students that are maybe our employees. If we can say, you know, yes, today was a grind, but overall, this is a noble place to work, and we do important work, and that there's a resource for that. I don't know what it is right now, but I'm going to find out and then I'll get back to you, right? That's what I want us to focus on. Become familiar with what you can, But the best way to do that is when you get a question, instead of throwing your hands up and saying, I don't know, stupid philosophy department. I don't know why you have to take that class. I think it's stupid, right? Instead of being that, we would say, huh, that's such a good question. Let me figure that out, or let's figure it out together. And then we're empowering others to see the noble mission instead of kind of throwing each other under the bus at times, of like, I don't know. Advisors are just mean. What can I say? Right? Like we can't do that. Or I don't know. That's a stupid requirement. Go take it at BYU and transfer back. I've heard that, right? And so instead of doing those kind of things, remembering this, even on the hard days, and try to help others, particularly the students, if you have student employees and others, to see that, gosh, yeah, there's down days, but overall, what a great thing we're all part of to be part of this mission. So, how can you do that? We just talked a little bit about that, but connect the dots. If you have not tuned into this, I think it was an ed-op in the Trib. Elizabeth Cantwell, My Vision for Land-Grant University in the 21st Century. Let's be honest, feels a little bit like what's going to happen with USU. We have new leadership. We have this really strong visionary person, and we think some changes are probably coming. Again, time for us to show some resilience, to show some sense of purpose. But if you read this, I think you'll start to at least get an idea of what her values are and what her vision for us is. And then maybe we can start to feel some of that resilience as well and adaptability as well in our jobs. I think, are to the point of questions. Last group, we didn't make it to questions. What questions do you guys have about all of this?
I didn't know what to expect. I'm like, why do I work at USU? Why do I work? Because I work at USU, but this really emphasizes more. And I'm a big advocate for education, so I'm just like you. If I hear somebody talking about school or going to college, I jump in, and I'm a graduate from Utah State University, so of course I'm trying to sell Utah State University, but overall, it's education is what you're looking for, so it doesn't matter what you go. But I really like this session. So
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for saying that.
Our one sentence abstract was quite a lot shorter than all of the other abstracts for this session, so we were a little brief perhaps.
Right, that's true. Are there other questions? Please don't forget to pick up one of these books and share it. Zoom, question on Zoom. Oh, perfect. Awesome. Any questions? Yeah. Yes.
So I was hoping you'd give us some reasons why you like to work here. And I would offer one of the things that helps me keep going in my job is to go to graduation and listen to students' stories and hear how a university education has impacted them directly. So if you ever need a little inspiration, go to graduation.
If you ever need inspiration, go to graduation. Such a good suggestion. If you want to help. Yeah, we always need volunteers for sure. I think that's great. Anything that you can do to reconnect to students. My job has evolved over this part of my job, 10 years has evolved a lot. Initially, I was the one meeting with students that kind of were at risk, and I loved that. And now I have staff, and I spend a lot of time meeting with faculty and with staff about this mission. That was a little hard for me to be one step removed, right? If you are 1 to 5 steps removed from the students, still look for ways to connect to this noble mission, because I do think it brings meaning, and it makes it so that whatever it is that you do, you have that sense of doing it for USU, this great experience, rather than, so I have brothers, they make a lot more money than I do. They got MBAs, and they've had good careers, but I sometimes look at what they do, and I would struggle to find meaning, I think, in some of some other jobs. For me, this life has so much meaning. And even though maybe the paycheck's not as great as some other opportunities, I counter that. And one of my brothers who's done really well, he recently said to me, you and Phil, my husband, you guys chose a really meaningful life. And I kind of envy that. And so remember that you've chosen to work in a meaningful life, and there's a lot to be said for that as well. Yep. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you so much for coming.